Hello, everybody. It's Monday, January 12th, and Felix and I are back at it. Obviously, on today's episode, the eyes of the nation now turn to the state of Minnesota and the city of Minneapolis as the regime's war on the employed and productive members of society has taken a rather dramatic escalation with the murder of Renee Good by the otherwise unemployable death squad members of ICE. Obviously, like I said, for whatever reason, Minnesota and Minneapolis has become sort of the front lines in, as I've described before, sort of an ongoing siege of this country by the Trump administration. So joining us to talk about it is Minneapolis resident and Minnesota-based poster, Maryam Mohamad. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm a longtime listener, but this is my first time getting to interact with you guys, so I'm really excited.
Well, we're pleased to have a long-time, first time on the show.
I mean, very unusual for one of our listeners to represent the employed, too.
I'm glad.
Maryam, I just want to start with, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, and could you just tell us a little bit about your background, and also just could you give us a sense of obviously since the killing of Renee Good, but also in the weeks leading up to that, Minnesota has been very much put in the crosshairs of, I don't know, this siege, ongoing siege and war on America that's happening right now. Could you tell us what does it feel like to be in Minneapolis right now?
It's bizarre. I mean, I was born in America. Not that any of that really matters, but I was born in America. I'm from Chicago, but I've lived in Minnesota for the last 13 years. I moved here in 2013, and it's bizarre. It's the strangest feeling. I mean, I don't want to sound like an alarmist or scare anybody, but it genuinely feels like we're being occupied right now. You hear choppers, helicopters overhead all the time, day and night. You hear sirens. It's the strangest feeling. I'm on edge. I have a lot of nerves right now, and I can recognize it. I could see it in other people. People are trying to be resilient. They're trying to stand up for in the moment. They're trying to be strong, but there comes a point where you recognize that you're up against the federal government, and that's a scary entity to be up against. And we recognize how small we are compared to something as powerful as that. But we're trying our best to keep ourselves level-headed.
Something I've been curious about is I was following some of the stuff in Chicago before this, and it seems like some of the things they did in Chicago, turning over a few apartment buildings at the behest of some slumlord, these humiliation campaigns. It was sort of an audition for what they were going to do in Minnesota. But I was wondering, just for the average person that lives anywhere in the Twin Cities, how do they sort of run headlong into the federal garrison? Does it start with your commute to work? Are the roads just jammed with unmarked SUVs? Or is it a more that feeling of helicopters circling overhead?
So they know what neighborhoods to target, right? So, for example, I mean, I used to live in Southside for 5 years. I just moved downtown 2 months ago. So I'm kind of I'm in an area where there's a lot of office buildings, federal buildings. They don't want to have those optics. I mean, Microsoft doesn't want to see ICE outside of their office building, right? They don't want that to affect them. So the neighborhoods that they're targeting are specifically Black and brown neighborhoods in South Minneapolis or other parts in St. Paul as well, where it's a little bit out of the way. It's not on your morning commute. It's not on these big roads, right? That's how we end up in 34th in Portland, where Renee Good was murdered. It's in these areas where this is highly residential areas, lots of houses, lots of apartments. They want to keep it a little bit away from the professional class. I'm using quotes here, professional class. They want to make sure that people don't see this as blatantly as it's happening. But there's people on the ground recording constantly. There's a lot of media here right now. So a lot of what I see, even though I'm on the bus, even though I'm walking around all day, even though I'm going into these areas, is online. I was in that area where Renee Good was murdered on 34th and Portland on Saturday. There was a huge protest there. I'm sure you guys saw that. And I did not see ICE presence. I did see police right at the vigil site. I saw a paddy wagon full of riot police, right? They were like fully loaded up, but they were inside the paddy wagon. I think they know, right? They knew that the media was going to be watching the protests. They know not to, I guess, be so blatant, but it is blatant because we're all online and we're all seeing what's going on because of the people on the ground recording.
So that's another thing I was kind of interested in. It's obvious the direct reason or the stated reason for why they're doing this is obvious. There's this obvious racial animus towards people of Somali descent. The reason for picking Minnesota and Minneapolis in particular is quite obvious. The locus of all like immigrant hatred now is Somalians in America. And a lot of the Trump second term is about sort of people who have a resentment towards 2020. It's a counter reaction to 2020. It's, office workers who are embarrassed that they posted a blackout square 6 years ago. But do you feel that there's also like they use these effectively segregated Midwestern cities as a test case because it's useful for them because they can go into these downtrodden, more minority populated neighborhoods and just perpetrate like the worst humiliation and brutality and outright murder in some cases. It's useful for them because they can see how the people who work for these massive corporations that are headquartered in Minneapolis, like Target or Best Buy, they'll see how much they can take in effect.
Yeah. Look, like I'm part of this like workforce, right? I'm part of that workforce. And I feel like we are in a way taking it. I'm working, like I'm still working. I still have meetings. I'm still answering my emails. And everybody else is too. And I can see it. I live downtown. I could see everybody just going to work. And I think there used to be a time where I believed that good people would stand up, would be like, well, the things that are happening right now are so atrocious that we can't go to work. We're going to, call off today. We're going to stand with our neighbors. That's not happening. I mean, the images that we're seeing out of Minneapolis right now is that there are cars that people find on the road that have the seatbelt cut, the windows down. Nobody's in the car, but the keys are in the ignition. Am I supposed to believe those people were raptured?
Oh, man.
Or am I supposed to like connect the dots here and understand what happened, that those people were abducted? And still people are going to work. I've gotten a few messages from my colleagues who are worried because I'm like one of the only people who is like living in and working in Minneapolis in our department. And they're like worried about me, but that's on a more personal level that they know me. They're worried about my safety. But then comes into question, like, what about everybody else here? What about all of these people who are just trying to go to work, who are just trying to live their lives, and they're getting abducted to God knows where? A couple of days ago, I'm sure you guys have seen this. Ilhan Omar, Representative Ilhan Omar, Senator Tina Smith, Representative Angie Craig tried to go to the Whipple federal ICE facility, and they were let in for, I think, about like 10 minutes or something. And then they were told, oh, you have to leave because this building wasn't funded by Congress. It was funded by the big, beautiful bill. And then right after that, Kristi Noem quietly signs some, I don't know what to call it. Is it legislation if Kristi Noem just says that no elected officials can enter ICE facilities unless they give a 7-day notice? Is that legal? I don't know if it's legal, but she said that. She said, you guys have to give us 7 days notice. What can they clean up? What can they cover up? What can they make look better in 7 days? before an elected official that the people, like me and you, elected into office, enter these facilities.
That's fucking horrifying.
Yeah. No, just seeing cars with like the windows broken and the seatbelt cut and the keys still in the ignition on the side of the road. Like you said, like, well, yeah, like the leftovers just happened or something. Like, yeah. And then there's absolutely no oversight on where these people are taken or what happens to them. And this is obviously in the context of them just shooting people in the head in the middle of the street in broad daylight. So like, imagine what you're not seeing. But, Maryam, I want to ask you, like, obviously, like, the Somali community has been made the target of like months now long, like right wing media operation to like turn the attention of the nation on the Somali community in Minnesota, and like particularly these fraud cases involving daycare centers or involving the state. Could you give us some background about like those fraud cases, which I mean, I guess were like originally prosecuted in like 2022, but like what does the Somali community in Minneapolis like feel like versus like how they're viewed by the rest of the country now?
It's a little bit weird because we're such a small population. I think there's not even like 65,000 people, Somali people in Minnesota, and I think nationwide
You heard it here first. They're taking over the state. They're taking over the state. 65,000 people.
Yeah, I mean, nationwide, there's only about 100,000 of us, so it's really bizarre, and I feel like this is we are a Black population, and we're Muslims too, right? So I'm Somali, and I've always felt it at the intersection of many things. Um, I almost want to say that. So Pete Hegseth is from here, and this feels very personal on a certain level. It's like when I lived in Chicago and I would tell people that I'm Somali, they wouldn't know where that is. They wouldn't know what continent Somalia is on. So it would take somebody who lives amongst Somali people to know who the heck we are, right? So it feels personal almost. It feels like Pete Hegseth was like, I'm sick of these people, get them out of here. But the fraud cases, more seriously, have been prosecuted, and there are still ongoing investigations. I think last year in the fall, there was another case that was all over the Star Tribune and other local media, where there was like 4 or 5 people being charged with fraud for some sort of medical billing issue. So DHS on the state level is all over that. People are being prosecuted. There's people who have gone to prison. There's people in prison for this crime, right? So for it to become like a national news story, it's clearly a tool. It's a cudgel. It's a reason to come into Minnesota. It's a reason to go against Governor Tim Walz. It's a reason to go against the place where Ilhan Omar represents, because Trump and the administration don't like them. You know, Somali people, we are a blip in this country. We have a strong impact, and we're a very entrepreneurial people, but we're such a small minority that I question it. I start to wonder, this is clearly just an excuse, right? Like, I'm just going to shoot straight from the hip. Yeah. This is clearly an excuse for them to come in here and to start some shit.
Right. And like, but like, you know, the arm of this abuse is ICE, which is like, at least theoretically, their remit is about illegal immigration. Now, correct me if I'm wrong or not, but like, isn't most, if not all of the Somali population in Minnesota already citizens?
Yes, my parents came here after the Civil War in the early 90s. They're citizens. Everybody I know is
the history of like most of the Somali community in America, right? It was like in the 90s, everyone remembers Black Hawk Down. That's how most Americans know about what they think of when they think of Somalia, if they've seen that movie or not. But the point is, small population, but like unlike like other immigrant groups here may or may not be documented, the Somali community is overwhelmingly, if not entirely, already U.S. citizens, full stop.
Right.
90% full citizenship in this country. So like sending ICE to brutalize this community, well, like eventually they run into the fact that like, okay, you're going to see a passport, and then what do? Well, what do? You get frustrated enough, just start killing white women in the streets. I mean, like that seems like a lot of this murder that happened does seem to be in some way a projection of their own frustration and like their lack of ability to deport Somalians, as you mentioned, a black and Muslim population that has been made public enemy number one. But like the problem is using ICE as the vehicle to do that is like they're not illegal immigrants. So what are you going to do? Like I said,
Right.
blow some woman's head off in the street for trying to kill an ICE agent by doing a K turn at 2 miles an hour.
Right. And that's where the crimes, they're committing crimes, they're committing fraud, they're wasting taxpayer dollars, right? That's where that comes in.
Welcome to the club. That's what being an American citizen is. I mean, it's baffling to me. Like, I'm sure fraud goes on all the time when functions of the state, like providing daycare or healthcare to people, are fucking auctioned off to these like shady middlemen rather than just direct government application of like the government directly paying and maintaining daycare centers. Of course, this is the story as old as time. This is how every immigrant group in America makes it, is by defrauding the federal government.
Right.
Defrauding someone.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's also interesting because like the area that they're in, right? So where Renee Good was murdered, it is a mile away from where George Floyd was murdered in 2020. So it's very clear that this is targeted, right? Why are they over there? Why this neighborhood specifically, right? Because they saw what happened in 2020. They saw a neighborhood that was willing to stand for justice. They saw, they saw the, I'm using quotes again, sorry, woke whites. And that's how a white woman gets killed in the streets of Minneapolis, right? It's gone so far beyond any like social justice like issue. I'm genuinely saying this is a federal government versus the American people issue now.
Yes.
Right? A white woman gets killed in the streets. You think that only happens to black people because historically that's who it happens to. Now white people are getting killed. So it's not a racial issue. This is the federal government declaring war on American people.
And like I feel like I don't need to editorialize too much about this because I'm sure everyone listening to this feels as we do. But like all I will say is I would really just encourage everyone not to lower yourselves to start arguing over like split-second freeze frames of this video. We all saw what happened. We all know what it is. And there is nobody on the planet, least of all the person you're arguing with, who genuinely believes that ICE agent was afraid for their lives. Okay? No, like this is a demonstration of power. The fact, and every video that they keep releasing to like be like, well, case closed, he's exonerated, is the one where he calls her a fucking bitch after he blew her head off. That doesn't sound to me like a guy who was very much in fear of their life, And like you bring up the George Floyd protests, and I remember with that, like it took the right a certain amount of time to congeal on a narrative that like, oh, he was on fentanyl and that's why he died. Whereas with this killing, it's so appalling that like it seems like their initial reaction was to say she's a deranged terrorist who tried to kill this guy with her car. How, like, just in terms of how you're observing it, like how do you think that line is going over? And like I feel like they settled on that early, but it's beginning to break up pretty quickly because I'm like everybody saw the video. We all like there's nothing to
it's pretty hard to deny. It's very difficult to deny. I think even the most conservative people I know personally have taken issue with the DHS narrative of what happened last Wednesday, right? They were so quick to respond. Within hours, they had their own statement, like you said, Will, declaring her a domestic terrorist. An investigation hadn't even happened. The car was still on the street when Kristi Noem came out and forgive me, I forget her name, the press secretary for DHS.
McLaughlin.
Yeah, McLaughlin, yeah. When they came out with their narrative. The car was still on the street. There was still blood on the airbag when they said that this is exactly what happened. So, any rational thinking person will know that no investigation had happened. Where is the evidence? They were fighting over whose investigation it was because the FBI was there, MPD was there, ICE was there. So there was this huge argument over jurisdiction, which is an ongoing argument. Attorney General Keith Ellison put out a statement a couple of days ago saying that they were going to do their own investigation after the FBI said that this was their jurisdiction. I'm trying not to make too many jokes, but it really feels like an episode of The Wire, like where they're like, no, this is our jurisdiction. Like it's so weird. But getting back to my original point, DHS was so quick to put out their own narrative, and then we see all of these videos from all of these different angles, seeing exactly what happened. It falls apart pretty quick. And even, again, the most conservative people I know are like, calling bullshit on that.
I've noticed just like over the weekend to like this morning, it seemed like there was some at some point, like all the people who like spent days being like, case closed. This is a deranged terrorist. The officer acted totally appropriately. He was afraid for his life. Now they seem to be coming around to like, Donald Trump was asked today, do you think the use of deadly force was justified in this shooting? And his response was, she was very disrespectful. And law enforcement officers shouldn't have to, quote, put up with that.
Yeah.
And it's like, they're just saying that, like, if you make fun of one of these bozos, if you laugh at them, if you don't show them the proper respect for their like fake ass job that nobody wants them to do and no one fucking cares about other than like a deranged minority of basically socially maladroit cretins, that you deserve to die. But like contained in that like rather nasty rhetorical shift is an acknowledgement that they're like, well, it's a difficult situation, like Donald Trump tried to show the video to be like, he was run over with a car. And then they were like, Mr. President, the video doesn't show that. He goes, I don't even like looking at it. And the fact that they're trotting out J.D. Vance to take complete ownership of this killing spree should tell you on some level that they know what a fucking loser this issue is for them.
That's what I was going to say, is that just the fact that they've given JD the Kamala role, delivering an explanation that is like self-contradictory, just within a single one. His first one was like, listen, it's a tragedy that this stupid bitch was rightfully executed. And you could tell that he was like, for the first time, nervous on his own footing, and maybe for the first time ever in this administration, suspecting that he had been given the Kamala border job, when he made, what I think is the most disgraceful and lowest post ever made on X, the Everything app, where after he made his like, one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic speech, he posted like a quote tweet about like some ice cream bullshit, and added RFK.
Yeah.
Like, is this going to be in the food pyramid? Which is like, anytime throughout, we have been on Twitter for like 13 years. Every time that there's something where it's like, hey, this guy came to a tweet up and there were mirrors on his shoes and he went into the women's bathroom. Anytime they're weird about a guy, like something's about to come out, they're just like, any good movies out lately? They're just, what's your favorite ice cream? And
it's like, I know your mentions are on fire right now.
And JD just like, oh my God, did I waste my life? For the first time ever, I've picked the wrong father figure, et cetera, et cetera. How do I send everyone off the scent of my panic? And he's like, why is it ice cream in the food group? That's a great one, you fucking fat crack baby.
On the JD thing, there's a large Somali population in Ohio too. So, I mean, it gets to a point where who knows about Somali people? Like, I can't get over this. Like, who knows about Somali people? Though, like Will said earlier, the biggest thing we're known for is Black Hawk Down. And that's about it. That's like our cultural touchstone. Like, we have Ilhan Omar, but
And there are so many wonderful, memorable Somali characters in that movie as well.
There's kicking 6ix9ine out of the Twin Cities. That was a big one. You mentioned how people in Chicago didn't know where it was. I just want to defend people from my hometown for a little bit. We're in Chicago schools, public and private. We're still using maps from antiquity where the world just falls off a cliff after about Pullman.
As a longtime listener, Felix, I know you're from Chicago, so I had to drop that tidbit in there. I was like, look, I know my people, so I need to be recognized as like, Chicago's my hometown, so that's where I got my education from. So I have to defend us too. But
I forgot one more Somali cinematic touchstone is the film Captain Phillips and the line, "I'm the captain now."
Yes, Tom Hanks. Oh my God! You know what? My friends are gonna be so mad that came up. Like, how dare you sell out?
Our chubby vice president and the various reactions to this killing. And like, I think there's something like very important to keep in mind about like the video we saw, and then like, so the subsequent video that was released, that was video that was recorded by the officer himself as he was killing this woman. Now, people who've been following this case will know that like apparently there was no body cam footage of any of this happening. However, there was footage of the officer himself holding a cell phone and recording while he was supposedly doing a traffic stop.
Mm-hmm.
Now, many people have pointed out, like, this is not exactly protocol for law enforcement to have one hand occupied with your fucking phone while you could be potentially in a life or death situation, as they would describe it. I'm not saying he was in a life or death situation,
Right.
but people have pointed out that this may be the result of basically an official order by ICE for their agents to produce content that they can make go viral. Well, congratulations. I guess they've been successful in that regard. But there's one other thing that I think is very important to remember about the circumstances of this killing. And I'm going to read, this is a news article from the year 2014, okay? 2014. The Los Angeles Times obtained an internal review of U.S. Border Patrol's use of force policies, which U.S. Customs and Border Protection has refused to release publicly. Members of Congress have seen a summary. While the Times did not offer the report in full, the paper did publish previously unseen snippets that portray a law enforcement agency operating under loose use of force standards and little accountability. Here are some of the key findings of the review released by the Times Thursday. Border Patrol agents have intentionally and unnecessarily stepped in front of moving cars to justify using deadly force against vehicle occupants. This is something that was clear to me from the moment that this happened, is that, like, if you are in a car near any of these deranged thugs, that is all the excuse that they need to kill you. And the idea that, like, oh, she turned the wheel toward him and was menacing him by doing a K-turn. These guys are professionals at putting themselves in a situation that could conceivably, in a barest legal sense, justify them killing the person who they're there to intimidate and terrorize. And that's exactly what they've done. You'll notice the conflicting vocal commands being given to drivers of either Renee Good or any of these other traffic stops. Keep your hands out of the window. Step out of the car. Move the car. Get out of the car. They create, and then, like, stepping in front of a car as it very slowly turns. Oops, I feared for my life. Time to dump 3 bullets in the head of a fucking woman, like, in the middle, just for no reason. And, like, we all know that's what's happening here. And, like, the people celebrating it know it too. And what they see here is a celebration of, like, a projection of their authority. And the idea that if that authority is belittled, then you must die. You must be executed.
I mean, I was reminded of two things the first day after this. One is the Daniel Shaver shooting, that really fucking horrifying video from Texas from about 8 or 9 years ago, of that guy just getting executed while crawling on the ground. And the thing that reminded me of that is the contradictory command specifically, because that was the big thing with the Shaver shooting, was that there was no way for Shaver to follow the commands of his murderer in such a way that would avoid his execution, or could possibly, there was no way for him to possibly follow all of them. It was the same thing: get up, get down, hands up, hands down. But it also reminded me of the Sean Bell shooting from now about 21 years ago, where the big thing with that is kind of like, there's a reason that, at least in the written guidelines for, probably most major city police departments and federal law enforcement, you don't shoot someone in a moving car, because then you have like a fucking 10,000-pound battering ram potentially just careening all over the place with no means of stopping it.
Yeah. With the conflicting commands thing, it always pops up into my head, like, their rhetoric, the Trump administration's rhetoric is always like this fog of war whenever they're called to account for anything, right? Especially like what happened, I think it was last week, right, in Venezuela. And whenever people in the media were asking them detailed and specific questions about exactly what happened, they kept talking about this concept of like the fog of war, right? The confusion. That's the fog of war. We don't have all the answers. Everything that America is doing abroad, overseas, they're bringing it's coming home to roost. They're doing it here, right? Like they they want this chaos, they want this confusion so that they can't be held to account, so that when it comes to the time to find the facts, to gather information, there's so much conflicting stuff, there's so much chaos that it's hard to make sense of what's going on. And that's what they want, which is, what are you gonna do? I mean, I'm sorry, I say that all the time, but I have to stop saying that. I mean, what are we gonna do? We're gonna have to be as clear as possible. We're gonna have to be as communicative as possible, communicate as clearly as possible exactly what's going on the ground. So that we don't let them have that, so that we don't let them create this chaos, so that they can't hide behind this fog of war, as they say.
I think that's a great point, though. This sort of an ethos of confusion. It's something that's been brought up a lot with the management of the American empire, that it differs from all other globe-spanning empires in human history, because instead of managing our properties and outposts through order obtained either through brutality or paying people off, the goal of the empire, at least since the middle to latter Cold War, seems to be creating conditions in areas that are not under our direct control to make them be as chaotic as possible. Syria being a great example, but tons of other places. Sometimes we do it through our proxies. The Saudi Wahhabization program of the 70s through the 90s is a great example of this. Creating what John Dolan termed an emir for every block system, where there is maximum division, chaos, and confusion. And it's under those circumstances, you don't have the legal or the public-facing obligation of having some colonial viceroy like Paul Bremer, but you can still loot and harvest proxy soldiers who don't even know that they're fighting for your goals. You could do all types of these things. And now, I mean, I think it has been home for a little while. There are some places in America that seem to be under the same regime of controlled chaos. But this Trump 2 thing differs in that it's everything is like that. There's a maximum amount of confusion and distrust and paranoia to engender the maximum amount of passivity in people.
Right. And to your point, I mean, even ICE agents, right? Sometimes they're uniformed, sometimes they're plain clothes, right? The reason why they do that is so that when I'm walking down the street, I'm looking at a guy who might not have any swag, right? He's wearing a baseball cap, some khaki shorts or something. And I'm like, is that an ICE agent? Is that a Fed? But it could be just some guy, So like they want us to be as confused as possible, so that we're suspicious of each other, so that we don't have clarity of the situation. And we really, really, I mean, I think that is like one of the main things that we have to focus on, is getting the facts straight. These are the leaders of this country right now, the Trump administration, they're not organized. They're not recording things. We have to be the ones who are keeping the record of history, so that they can't deny it when it comes time, hopefully, to hold them to account.
Well, you bring up like speaking with clarity about what's happening, right? How would you rate the city and state officials of Minnesota, beginning with Mayor Fry in Minneapolis up to Governor Tim Walz? How would you rate the way that they have spoken about and responded to this campaign of terror in their own state?
Right. They're saying a lot of the right things. I was listening to NPR this morning. They had Mayor Fry on. He seemed alarmed. I'm not going to lie. He sounded like he was in a bunker, which is very scary. I mean, he was on like some landline. The feedback was crazy. I was like, if he's in a bunker, what am I doing? But that's my allegation, allegedly.
Well, he did use the F word. He did say
right.
the F word
yes.
in a press conference.
Yes, they're saying a lot of the right things. They're standing up. But in reality, I mean, that's grandstanding if there's no action behind it. I could not imagine being the governor of a state, watching federal troops come into my state and occupy the streets of the two major cities, including the capital, right? St. Paul is the capital of Minnesota, and just not do anything. The only time Walz mentioned sending out the National Guard was in case the protests got too crazy. Yeah. So they can say all the right things. They can go on CNN. They can write for Mayor Fry wrote an op-ed for the New York Times. But if there's no action behind it, then I'm pissed. People are pissed. I mean, last week after Renee Good was murdered, ICE agents went into Hennepin County Medical Center, which is a hospital in Minneapolis, and started harassing the staff and employees there. Mayor Fry could have told the police chief, Brian O'Hara, to trespass them, to get them the hell out of the hospital. They didn't do that, right? So it is so bewildering to see what's happening here and see that our elected officials are not doing anything. Kristi Noem announced today that they're sending 1,000 more Customs and Border Patrol to the state of Minnesota. Why? And Tim Walz and Mayor Fry are standing around twiddling their thumbs, going on NPR, going on CNN. I mean, something has to happen here. People on the neighborhood level are standing together, trying to record, trying to get in the way of ICE, trying to make sure that they're not abducting people, abducting their neighbors. And it gets to a point where regular everyday people are up against the federal government and the state is not doing anything about it.
Yeah, and like I know, like
states' rights.
I mean, like, well, I mean, they could always, trot out the supremacy clause, but like, there are many law enforcement agents, under the badge and flag of the state of Minnesota, in addition to the, flag of the United States of America. You'd think a governor or mayor could, instruct them to protect the people of their own state against these, occupiers, essentially. But I'm sure that there is a litany of excuses for why they can't do that, or why they can't arrest these murderers and fucking just these thugs and like who are there to, I'm sorry, terrorize most directly anyone who even looks to be not white or perhaps is undocumented. But like, make no mistake, they are there to terrorize and kill everyone.
Yeah,
everyone. And so like, okay, so then the responsibility for that falls to just citizens, people like Renee Good, people who are there who like, I'm sorry, like, and people are saying like, oh, she has no right to interfere with a federal law enforcement agencies. Well, that may be a crime, but like, it's your duty if you have a fucking soul as a person to do something to interfere with the fucking with the operations of this like racial purification Gestapo who are murdering people in your fucking neighborhood.
Everything that we know as Americans, everything that we're taught from a very young age is that America is a land of like these, we went up against the British Empire, right? Like the American Revolution. I know that all of this is like so valorized. It's so whitewashed. But we're taught like, hey, no tyranny, don't tread on me. And then when we try to do that, when we try to stand up to these federal government forces that are impeding on our inalienable rights, then we're told, hey, you're not letting us do our job. You deserve to die. You deserve to be murdered. You deserve to be abducted off the street and sent to God knows where. I mean, it is so crazy to me. For me, we didn't even get to like arresting and charging this ICE agent, right? Because we're so focused on the rest of ICE brutalizing and terrorizing the people of the Twin Cities. We can't even like make our demands because we're so busy trying to not get abducted. See how we get put in this precarious situation?
I'm glad you brought it back to that, because like that to me would be like the test case here. This fucking officer needs to be charged and prosecuted for murder in the state of Minnesota. And if that doesn't happen, then that's a pretty good indication. I know JD Vance has already announced that like he has absolute total immunity. Mm-hmm. But I'm saying at least charge him. Get him in a courtroom, even if it doesn't work. Do something to fucking take away the freedom of this fucking murderer who is one. Like I said, like the reason that this guy has a job is to put himself in situations where he can conceivably kill someone and then claim qualified immunity. I feared for my life. That is who these people are. And quite frankly, we've heard a lot about like how poorly trained these ICE guys are. He was a 10-year veteran of ICE and a fucking Iraq and Afghanistan war veteran before that. His
Right.
training is what allows him to do shit like this. That's what they're trained to do.
Yeah.
I'd prefer if they had less training, to be honest.
Yeah. And I mean, like, of course, we have to talk about this in context of 2020, right? Derek Chauvin was charged, I think George Floyd was murdered on May 25th, 2020. And Attorney General Keith Ellison was able to bring charges against Derek Chauvin. I believe it was like June 3rd or something. Correct me if I'm wrong. But it took a couple of days, right? There was a lot of unrest. There was a lot of, it was wild over here. I mean, this time compared to last time, we are being very measured and level-headed, and there's not as many, the uprising is not as, I guess we're not, like, people are not destroying buildings like we did in 2020, right? We're trying to toe the line.
This was like George Floyd was killed like about a mile away from Renee Good was murdered.
Yes, less than a mile away. Yes. And so like last time in 2020, the uprising was so chaotic. A lot of property was damaged. People were mad. People were angry. There had been a series of police killings because of Minneapolis Police Department. And this was like just like the eruption. George Floyd's murder was just like, we can't take it anymore. And we were still like, the city's demands were met when Derek Chauvin was arrested, when he was charged. Now he's in prison, right? That's what we were demanding then. That's what we're demanding now. We're taking a much more measured way of protesting because we're being put in this precarious position where it's like, if we do start uprising to the level that we did in 2020, then we deserve whatever happens to us, right? Like, we deserve to be mowed down. We deserve to be killed by ICE, right? We deserve to be abducted. We deserve to be sent away to CCA or wherever else.
I'm sure the transfer of another 1,000 DHS law enforcement officers to Minnesota, I'm sure, like, to a large degree, they are hoping that something like that happens to justify even further violence and crack down on civil liberties and to protest, and just like further opportunity to kill more people that they regard as traitors or others or some evil in some way.
Right. But then if we're being peaceful,
if you just roll over, they get what they want regardless.
Exactly. We're being peaceful and we're still getting, railroaded by ICE. We're getting completely brutalized by these forces, and we're expected to not make demands. We're expected to just be like, oh, it's fine if you don't arrest and charge this guy, as long as you guys don't kill us. What kind of a situation is that to be in? They're putting us in they're cornering us, basically. They're cornering us. It's like, hey, you guys are being peaceful. We're still sending the forces in. We're still going to brutalize and terrorize you, and you better not retaliate.
The reaction of Frey and Waltz has been interesting because, Frey brought out the F word, even though I don't think he should call the vice president that. It's definitely like it's bringing out the ICBM. But friend of the show, Rocky Viperwave from critically acclaimed stream Komodo Friend Zone, said that Tim Waltz reminds him of an authority figure in Beavis and Butthead who would be waylaid. But he would not know how to deal with them. He would not know. He would have no idea. And with both of them, it seems like the only thing they want is just to like get them out, not deal with this anymore. And it really makes me pessimistic about when and if the next time Democrats are in power, because charging this guy is not an insane position. Any country that had halfway functioning institutions or even just a cynical interest in keeping this thing going would do that. And if your only move is just to like use the F word, you might not believe in constitutional crises, but you're fucking in one.
Yeah.
It's here, whether you want it to be or not. And you either rise to the occasion or you drown in it.
Yeah. I mean, they use the Constitution a lot, right? They're like, oh, it's your rights. You have is it Third or Fourth Amendment where you don't have to let these soldiers or these...
the oft forgotten Third Amendment. No quartering of soldiers in your property.
Yeah. You don't have to house federal agents. Well, okay. Well, what if they just don't care? We see they don't care, right? We see them not caring. We see them not adhering to the Constitution. So, I mean, I'm of the belief right now, from everything that I'm seeing, that the Constitution is gone. It's up in flames. We don't have the rights that the Constitution promised us. We don't have any elected officials who are trying to even uphold these rights, right? So, I mean, I'm operating with the lens that the America that we once knew or were lied to about is gone. That's gone. That's out the window. They're going door to door. They're breaking people's car windows to drag them out, cutting their seatbelts. I mean, what am I supposed to believe? I'm operating under the assumption that at any moment, regardless of if I have my passport with me or not, this is my birthright as an American citizen to be here, that they can arrest me, detain me, abduct me, and send me wherever the hell they want. And I think everybody should seriously know that. All of us. It's not just people who are here illegally, it's everybody.
Yeah. Like a little bit earlier, you talked about how like everything America does in foreign policy over the course of our lifetimes seems now to be being applied directly to the United States of America. And like long ago on this show, I described like what is the MAGA movement about in their seemingly in like their turn against what they would like nation building or interventions in foreign countries. Obviously, they're not really against all of that, as evidenced by the last week or so. But the point I made is that like the Republican voting base has soured on wars of foreign entanglements or like what was essentially the neoconservative vision. I mean, they're still basically doing the same things, but with like some slight tweaks. But the point being is that like they were no longer psychically satisfied by kicking the shit out of a country like Iraq or Afghanistan and killing people over there because it didn't end up the way they wanted it to, and it was like a big fucking embarrassment for everyone involved. What they want, and immigration is like the wedge at which like this finds its expression, is they want to wage a war on this country. They were like, why should we have troops overseas when our real enemies are our neighbors, are just people who live down the street from me, people who work at Target, high school students, a mother in her fucking car. They want the war on America. And like, to me, that sums up what MAGA is. And we're seeing it right now. This is what they want. Anyone who opposes them, like they think like this is how they will gain the respect that they lack in their own lives. And I don't know, like it's some balm to the self-loathing that they must feel constantly. That's why, like, blow a woman's head off. Fucking
Yeah. And remember, like, I mean, Somali people are here because of it was because of the civil war that was happening among Somali people, but American intervention aggravated that, and it caused a lot of influx of Somali refugees to come to America, right? So we're here partially because of American interventionist policies. So they ruin our country, right? They ruin Somalia with their interventionism, and they continue to do so. Trump boasted about drone strikes in Somalia. Obama did the same thing. I'm not sure about Brandon, but probably, right. And then we come here. My parents and their generation have their children here, buy homes here, have businesses here. I'm an American. I was born here, and then all of a sudden, like the guns turn on us on American soil. So what are we supposed to do? I mean, we're supposed to just go back to Somalia so that they could turn the guns on us over there.
Well, like you mentioned, like your parents came here because of desperate conditions in the country that they were born in. I'm sure they probably would have liked to stay here, but they came to this country, became citizens, and like you said, had a family, started a business, are members of the community.
Mm-hmm.
That is what makes Somalians a target for people like ICE and the Donald Trump and Stephen Miller and JD Vance and the Trump administration. It's not that like you're like some sort of a refusal to assimilate or that you're so violently anti-American. No, it's because you have families, businesses, and are part of the community and are probably more family and community minded than any average white person in this country. And that's equally true of Latinos as well. It is precisely because immigrants are part of America, have businesses, part of the community, and basically are just a success story. That is the threat to these people. That is what they seek to attack. That is, I think, like the point of this occupation of this country. That's why they have to talk about immigration in terms of invasion.
Right. And I mean, like, also, like, Islam, right? The religion of Islam goes against a lot of like capitalistic tendencies, right? Like interest rates. Like if somebody gives you a loan, you're not supposed to charge interest, right? That's like
Moral, yeah.
completely anti-capitalist, right? No gambling. You're not supposed to be gambling. Everything is gambling now.
That's the whole fucking economy now, yeah.
Yeah, everything is casino. So a lot of like our inherent values, religious values, cultural values are anti-capitalist, and they don't like it. They don't like it. They don't like us because we don't adhere to these capitalistic values.
But like what you do adhere to is everyday normal traditional American values as most people understand them, which is like, go to work, raise your family, just, hang out, have just games on,
Yeah, like I mean, I grew up watching the WWE, which is like the most American thing ever. So like, come on now.
Ooh, you bet I got something to say. You check it out. Ooh, the most beautiful body in professional wrestling. And I got something to talk about.
Well, another example I want to mention of this, like, I guess, like Imperial Boomerang, is that, like, also on video, on audio, after the killing, are these fucking, like I said, these feral cretins denying medical care to the woman whose head they just blew off. There was a doctor who was like trying to intervene, being like, I'm a medical, and they were just like, relax, stand away, denying an ambulance. There was no medical, like, EMS people on scene at all. Where have I heard that before? From now on, I'm calling it the Midwest Bank.
Yeah. And, of course, everything goes back to 2020, but not only was Derek Chauvin charged, the officers that were standing around not doing anything, they were charged too for aiding and abetting. So whoever was on the scene there, ICE that were on the scene just waiting around, turning the doctor away, they're culpable too. I mean, we're not just calling for the charging and arresting of Jonathan Ross. We're calling for all of those people who were standing around him, not allowing medical aid for this woman to be charged as well.
And like as I've seen people desperately try to do, is craft some argument by which be like, I know this looks bad, but like police involved shootings, it's often like maybe morally wrong, but like legally okay, or it's hard to say, split second reactions. It's an unfortunate situation. Both parties behaved in a way that exacerbated the situation, blah, blah, blah. If this were just a normal, what would be advertised as like, a regrettable. Well, first of all, for it to be regrettable, any of the people talking about it would have to act like it's regrettable at all. And then what these assholes did was immediately celebrate it instantly and say the bitch got what was coming to her. But that being said, like at every moment of like what should be normal law enforcement protocol involving a shooting or any event leading up to what could become a shooting was abrogated in the most flagrant ways. The most flagrant ways, like the fact that this guy escalated the situation, that he stepped in front of her fucking car, that he shot her when she was behind the wheel of a car, and then that like after the shooting happened, there was like absolutely like no attempt to maintain any forensic evidence. The crime scene was fucking trampled. A denial of medical care to the person who was shot. They did not act in any way like this was anything other than a murder they were trying to cover up, which is what it was.
Right, and we have precedent. We have. I mean, a similar situation happened. It was MPD. It wasn't a federal agent, but we know that police shootings or these, murders at the hands of law enforcement, there's a legal action that we can take here. And I am so bewildered as to why this legal action isn't happening. I mean, this woman was murdered last Wednesday. Today's Monday. What are we waiting for here? What are we doing here? What's going on? I mean, I'm trying so hard not to be screaming at the top of my lungs right now. I'm trying so hard not to be just pissed off and trying to come across as a rational person. But you get to a point where you're like, what the fuck is going on? Sorry.
I'm with you, but like one more piece of evidence for the Midwest Bank theory is I did see news reports today in which protesters are bringing their children to these protests. In the news report, law enforcement described the children as, quote, human shields.
Yeah.
Need I say more?
And see, that's what I'm talking about when I say what America does abroad or what it funds and bankrolls abroad. We just watched 3 years of the genocide in Gaza that is still ongoing, where they use the exact same rhetoric. They're using their children as human shields. Anything that they say and do abroad, they bring it back home to use against us. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Hillary Clinton calling Haiti the petri dish of democracy.
yeah.
It is always a test to see not only what works, but what people will accept. Going back to what you said about like wanting to come out this measured and level headed, but just feeling like a white hot rage, not only at the events, but the lack of any attempt to make them pay for it on the parts of an opposition party. It just I'm reminded of this argument that I kept having with a regular Democrat friend that I've talked about, where we kept going back to the same thing, which is it doesn't fucking matter if the next president is a Democrat or if Kamala had won this one, if no one fucking goes to prison, if no one's afraid of the consequences if they do this shit again. Even if you are the most cynical, like, all I want out of this project is to build more fucking condos, whatever the fuck. There's no route back to that doesn't run through a few federal trials, a few fucking dozen of them at this point.
The only conclusion that I can come to as to why the Democrats are not doing anything about this is that they want to do it. Right?
Yes.
Like once they get the reins of power,
I got a lot of trouble for saying that not too long ago. But like, I mean,
want to do the
indicated once again. I mean, like it's a one party state essentially, and there's a left and right wing of one party, but essentially they're on the same team, And the fact that like they're I don't know, seeming reticence to prosecute anyone or just put these fuckers in jail, take away their money and power, because like if you don't, this shit's gonna keep happening. And the answer is like they're okay if it keeps. I mean, look at all the Democrats who up until like a month ago was like voting for symbolic resolutions to like thank ICE for their bravery, or the ones now who are just being like they need better training. Get rid of them. Prosecute every one of these assholes.
I know there was last year when the ICE question was part of not last year. When was that? 2024, right? Time is so finicky. The ICE question was part of the election, right? We were asking these elected officials, well, what are you going to do about ICE? And the Democrats were saying, well, abolishing ICE, we're not for that. We don't want to abolish ICE. What conclusions can we come to from them saying that? It's that they want to use ICE for their own purposes, right? They want their own federal agents to do whatever they want with. Right. But I'm also sure that knowing the Democrats, even if they had ICE within their own control, they would not be using it to this level.
If I was a Democrat and I wanted to have ICE, but under my purview, fine. Do it, but fucking zip tie and deport Elon Musk and Peter Thiel.
Yes,
to deranged, evil, illegal immigrants who hate this country, our history, our Constitution, and are currently looting it for parts and turning it into the fucking Third Reich.
Exactly. Yeah, they're just so ineffective. What was that Onion headline? Oh, Democrats walk back on the brink of courage. I butchered it. But it was during the government shutdown where they just didn't do anything then either. I mean, everything that we've seen happen for the last year or so, where it was time for the Democrats to step up, have some courage, have some bravery. They've done nothing, and I'm not surprised. I'm not shocked at all.
Just one thing I want to get back to. I mean, we've talked a lot about like the parallels between this and George Floyd, both from its geographic distance and proximity, but like once again, it comes back to like why Minnesota, why Minneapolis, and you mentioned that like Derek Chauvin was eventually charged, prosecuted, and convicted along with several of the other officers. There were obviously uprisings, riots, whatever you want to call it. There was, property damage. And like, obviously since 2020, every time I hear Minneapolis described in the media, it's described like it's like still on fire or that like it's like fucking Mad Max or something. But like, do you think that like, once again, there is sort of a symbolic as much as practical reason for why like as sort of Minneapolis being like the revenge because someone like Derek Chauvin was convicted and that like people did rise up and like, were fed up with being killed by the police. They burned some property. Everyone freaked out over it, but like those officers were charged. Do you think like what I mean, like Minneapolis, both as a site of like, a visible and much demonized immigrant community, as much as like a symbolic national platform for revenge against any kind of accountability or public or like, democratic dissent against like law enforcement and the agents of, the state.
Right. Minneapolis and Minnesota in general has been a thorn in the side of the federal government for like at least 100 years. In 1934, there was like a horrible workers' strike here in Minneapolis that was like super violent because workers were demanding better working conditions and were trying to organize and unionize before workers had the right to unionize and organize. That led to FDR signing legislation that gave workers the right to unionize and organize, right? In the civil rights era, Minneapolis was also a huge, zone, a hub of civil rights activism that helped lead to the, civil rights wins of the 1960s. We have Minnesota was the only state that didn't vote for Reagan during one of his elections, right? So we've been an annoying thorn in the side of the federal government for a very long time. And this is just a continuation of that. I love being living here. I love Minneapolis, even though like Chicago is a very similar place to Minneapolis. But I love being from Minneapolis and living here because once we get set off, once you piss off the residents of Minneapolis, the whole world will know. Right? Like we don't just go quietly. We don't. If something happens here, we are in the streets. We're active. We make sure people know how pissed off we are. And it's very special that way. But then, of course, it leads to being in the crosshairs of the federal government. But that's not going to make us back down. If anything, I've seen people even more pissed off, right? We were pissed off a week ago. Today, we are even more pissed off because we see the federal government saying, oh, we'll send 1,000 more agents. Okay, well, I'm not sure what the next week is going to look like, but I'm sure people are going to be in the streets organizing and making a very loud ruckus to make our position known. We're not going to just lay down and let them just bombard us and railroad us. We're not. So that's a big part of the reason why we're so often in the news, why Minneapolis is so often in the news. I wish that the very talented, creative people, entrepreneurial people of the Twin Cities and the state of Minnesota were spotlighted for their talents, for the good things. I mean, it's very good to stand up for your rights, but for non-political reasons, I wish we were highlighted and spotlighted for what makes the Twin Cities so special on a human level. But when bad shit happens, when shit goes down, we're not going to just take it.
I think that is a really good point to hit on. That besides the obvious reasons, maybe Minnesota is singled out in particular because it has some of the only remaining Americans who won't just be spit on and treated like pigs. They will not, like Texans, happily freeze through the winter and sign a pledge pledging to never boycott Israel.
Yeah. No, it's like Minnesota's everything Texas fucking thinks they are.
Yeah.
And it should, and like Texas, maybe it should become its own breakaway republic after. But one of the last things I want to bring up is like, given the abuse and demonization of the Somali community in Minnesota and the Midwest in particular, do you think Americans would be? I mean, like, I'm shocked at like obviously the ignorance of the American people, but like, do you think people would be more welcoming, or they would feel differently about Somalis if they knew that God literally promised Minnesota to the Somalian people, and that it is the indigenous, and that it also is the indigenous homeland of the Somali people that are now returning after a long exodus?
Yes, I mean, look, Utah wasn't the only state that was promised to people. Okay?
It's in the Bible. Look it up.
Yeah,
there somewhere.
No, but like that's the very good thing about Somali people is that like we are very humorous like people. I mean, we meet a lot of things that we're faced with like humor and joking around and honestly trolling. I mean, I've spent like since 2009 like trolling on Twitter, so like this is what we do. This is our gig.
I think you probably saw it like I saw it was like a Somali Uber driver arguing with ICE agents at the Minneapolis airport. And you could tell that those ICE agents just like were not ready for like being argued with that hard.
Yeah. I mean, all we do, I mean, like if you come to Minneapolis, which by the way, please do, you will just see like at the coffee shop, like a group of uncles every day, just like sitting there with like politicking, like arguing with each other about like, political events and current events and stuff. So like,
not on their phones having their fucking brains melted by an iPad. Actual community, which is horrifying and which is an abomination to the rulers of this country.
Right. Yeah. So all we do all day is argue amongst ourselves, right? So like when somebody else enters the chat, right? Like the proverbial chat, like we're ready to go. We're ready to fire off. So, I mean, Somali people are very resilient. I was talking to somebody at the corner store today, actually this morning when I went to get my Red Bull. And it's a East African man, an Ethiopian man, and he brought it up. Like this is on the top of everybody's mind. ICE basically occupying the city of the Twin Cities, the cities of St. Paul and Minneapolis, and he was like, "Well, I'll be fine. What are they going to do? Like send me back to Africa? Like I'll be fine." And that's like, somebody who's staring down the barrel of the federal government, just basically being like, "I'll be fine either way." That's the type of people we are. We've people who have literally packed up, left everything that they knew behind, everybody that they knew behind, came to a country where they don't even speak the language. And then they still, own businesses, own homes, have families here, learn the language, right? Speak English very well.
Once again, I come back to that's exactly why when I see these ICE agents, like they're the 8 chins peering out from underneath a ski mask, waddling around, slipping on ice. The fact that most of these guys couldn't get a job as a fucking mall security guard. That's why they hate immigrants so much. Because they have something. They work hard. They have skills. They're a member of the community. Unlike these unemployable dolts who's like, only way to feel good about themselves is to kill a woman.
Right. So we're strong, we're resilient, and that's the American spirit. That's what people learned when they came here, and that's, I'm sure they had that, of course, as proud Somali people when they came here. But you're not going to break us down. They're not going to break us down. We'll be resilient and we'll fight back. And what happens will happen. I'm hoping for the best, but we'll still fight back the best that we can.
I'm reminded of the time where I was at my job at Billy's on Grand, and I actually found a 10,000-year-old coin that had Somali script on it.
Yo, that's facts. That's facts. God promised Minnesota to the Somalian people, and like, look, you've been very generous in sharing it with Norwegians and Germans for as long as you have, since the 90s. But I will end this episode, Maryam. I really want to thank you for your time and for sharing your experience with us. And please be safe. We're all rooting for you. But I just want to end the show by saying Minneapolis has a right to exist, and Minnesotans have a right to defend themselves. Okay. And if anyone has a problem with that, you're anti-Somalianist, anti-Somalianism, and I'm not going to stand for it.
I had more rights as a non-Somalian in Ramsey County than I do in New York City.
Well, thank you so much, guys, for having me. I'm a huge fan, so this is like a super surreal moment, but I'm so honored, and thank you so much for like letting me speak my piece. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I wish we could have talked to you on slightly less grim circumstances, but as the occasion demands, you met it wonderfully, Maryam. So really, thank you so much for your time. Stay safe and keep fighting the good fight. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Maryam Mohamad, everyone. We're gonna leave it there for today's show. Any business to conduct at the end, Chris?
Yes, our holiday sales on both of our books, the comic book and No Pasarán, the second printing of Matt Christman's book, are still available. I believe we are running our holiday sales through the end of this week, so this is your last opportunity to buy the comic book Year Zero, a Chapo Trap House Comics Anthology, plus No Pasarán, Matt Christman's Spanish Civil War. Links for that will be in the description. And of course, follow us on Instagram, Chapo Trap House Reel, on Blue Sky, Chapo Trap House Reel, on Twitter, Chapo Trap House, and subscribe on patreon.com/Chapo Trap House to get every episode.